Okay, Mary, you ready?
We're ready.
All right, welcome everyone. We are here for the Mid-Biennium budget review, and all of our department heads and a lot of their team members are here as well, so we're ready should you have any questions. I wanted to kind of start a little bit tonight to remind you as we begin to go through this. This is different than when you went through this when newly elected. The mid-biennium process, because we pass and adopt a biennial budget, is slightly different. So we're going to talk about that because really the budget is already adopted. This is just an adjustment period, and when we get down to it, I'll show you full schedule here, but I'm going to give you just a real brief overview of what we do in mid-biennium. I'm going to talk about fiscal year 2020. Why do we care about fiscal year 2020? We do because it impacted the 21 budget as things ended up. So I want to give you a quick snapshot of where that is. Then our finance director is going to do a revenue review because COVID made things very interesting. So we're going to talk through that, where we thought we were last summer compared to now. A little bit about our debt. And then just major things that were in the budget message, personal services, which in English means employees that I've added during the last calendar year or fiscal year. A little bit about significant changes going on in the general fund. I'm going to do a CIP overview, but not near the level you get during the biennial process. But we can always take a deep dive into something. If I'm not mentioning it and you want to talk about it, we're ready to do that. And then I'll summarize and talk about beyond the current biennium, as well as a little bit about Juneteenth, as I had previously indicated we would talk about tonight. So we're going to run through this. You can stop me with questions at any time, and I've got my whole team here. So as I just indicated a minute or two ago, we're really here with the mid-biennium just to make some adjustments. Our revenue projections have changed, and they've changed for the better, and Allison's going to talk to you about that. I'm going to talk about a little bit with our capital expenditures and project adjustments, and I'll talk through that in the CIP discussion. Carry forward is an accounting term that can drive me crazy, but we're just going to pick up budget money and move it to the next year in English for the non-accounting people like me. And then we do budget for some new opportunities. You'll see things like we've talked ad nauseum about the Cox and Wire roundabout. That shows up in here because this is the time in which it actually shows up in a budget adjusted. And then we just don't make major changes typically and introduce a lot of new projects during this time. I think the caveat is you need to understand if it's not in here now, it doesn't mean we wouldn't add things during the fiscal year and then adjust. We'll adjust again when we drop into the next biennial budget process. So it's not the end-all be-all. Projects come and go and things happen and we need to pivot, and we do. So kind of moving through a brief revenue review. This sometimes doesn't read easy to me, so I'm going to try to break it down in English. Also, the adjusted budget is what we would have adjusted really in our last mid-biennium review. So that was actually the budget for fiscal 20. The audited actuals in the middle, what the auditor said where we really were, and the variance is the changes. And so what's interesting, despite COVID in 2020, our revenue outperformed projections by about 4.1% or $3.9 million. Allison will talk more about this, but none of that was sales tax. Sales tax was flat. As a growing community, and as you see, I'll say in here, we grow at 3 to 5% a year. You know, Census Bureau always says we're fast growing. That helps a lot with property taxes, business license fees, and other things. Business license fees, even in 20, were good, but remember, people paid those based on 2019 sales, and so we see a little different trend in 21 where those went, if they had lower sales, they often pay a lower business license fee. While our total revenues, they increased over fiscal year 2019 by about 2.6 million. I think what's important about that to remember is that 2019 was a record year, and we budget conservatively, and we were on a trajectory to have 2020 knock 2019 out of the water. And what saved us in part in 2020 also was that Georgia and Alabama fiscal year had begun, and those games were at home and we were at full capacity. And basketball season can always be robust. So those things kind of saved us. In expenses, mainly due to COVID, 2020 ended where we spent less. While our departments are always fiscally responsible, we weren't traveling, we weren't performing a number of programs, especially in Parks and Recreation. We weren't doing some of the things that we do in normal operations. So we saved about $6.6 million in operating budgets, about 9.5%. And then in capital budgets, that's always a fluctuation. And capital budgets have to do with timing, among other things. So kind of reading the chart, we had projected at the very bottom in the yellow and the gray/blue middle column that we'd have an ending net ending fund balance of 36.29%, when indeed it was 67%. And a lot of that jumps in capital projects that we move from year to year. So then just going and talking about capital projects, and I've already kind of highlighted this, we just spent a little less than expected ultimately, but what happens is scheduling bites us, as well as capacity of our contractors, among other things. And we talk about this constantly, and we always have a 10, 12, $14 million hit of capital projects. We just move from one fiscal year to the next year, and this is pretty much reflecting the same. In general, though, in finishing with such a high fund balance, I want to remind you that the city council's goal is 20%, to have a net ending fund balance ratio of 20%. City manager's goal is to have one of 25%, and here we are at 67%. Allison and I will talk also a little bit about, are we sitting on cash, and is that a good idea, and what does this really mean? And let us get to that, as I know you're contemplating that in your head, is, well, that this ends there, but that also means revenues tend to end higher, other things exacerbate, projects transfer on down the line, and we'll talk about that throughout this presentation. So if we get to the end and you still need information, we'll get there. So all in all, 2020 ended stronger than anticipated, and also gave us a big bump starting into 21. And we carried a big ending balance, and that's why I'm saying this 12.7 million stronger, because you finish stronger happens. So just kind of giving you the highlight. To say, though, that we didn't take a hit from COVID is not an accurate statement, because we budget conservatively, but we can also proudly say, because we are conservative, we kept all of our services going. We didn't lay people off. We were able to maintain our equipment and so on. I would like to maintain our roads a little bit better, and I'll talk about that later, and some of that is contractor busyness and related issues, but we'll talk through that. It would not be wise from a budgetary standpoint to spend ending balance down to 20%. One of the reasons we could weather COVID and other unanticipated events or natural disasters is because we do have some reserves. And if I were to budget this and go crazy and do a crazy spend down, our bond rating agencies wouldn't like that, and those 1.8% or so interest rates that we just saw on this last issue would be out the window. So fiscal responsibility is our key, and that's why this city has been very stable and successful for many years. But I will say that, we try our best to spend the taxpayer dollars responsibly, and we don't want to sit on huge balances of money. And so you'll see at the end of this, in latter years, as the CIP balances itself out, we always intend and we always sit in this 25 to 35% ending balance range. It's our ability to get projects done in circumstances such as ALDOT beyond our control that often have us sitting on money that is budgeted that we can't spend at the time. So it's not that it's not in the budget to spend it, it's sometimes ability to execute for a lot of external reasons. So Allison's going to talk about, from a finance director perspective, and she'll try to speak English also, a little bit about our revenue and a little bit about our debt, and then I'll be back to you to go over the other budget highlights.
Hey everyone. Okay. So last summer I started the presentation for the biennial budget saying revenue projections were a little challenging at that time. I became finance director in September of 2019, and a short 6 months later, here's a pandemic. We need to see what you can do with that. So quite challenging. I will start it the same way. It continues to be challenging, but right now it's a little bit of a different challenge because we're seeing some pretty heavy increases in revenue right now, which is not exactly what we expected for the first part of this year at least, but we'll get into that. I'm going to primarily concentrate on the things that are changing in this budget. I won't go through everything, but just a reminder to you of our top 10 revenue sources. These revenue sources here are 90% of our general fund budget, so they are the ones that we concentrate on the most, with sales tax being the biggest. It's 45 to 50% of our general fund budget, so I spend most of my time analyzing sales tax, various categories of sales tax, trying to make sure we understand what's going to happen. And I will say this time period right here is not something that anybody will understand It does not make a lot of sense, what's going on. We can make assumptions, but it's been very, very unusual. So the first two columns you see on here, 2019 and 2020 are actuals, and as Megan mentioned, you can see that 20 total revenue was higher. Sales tax was completely flat. We were like maybe 1.1% increase in sales tax in 20 over 19. We had some other things that made up for that. Property tax, the Simplified Sellers Use Tax, construction permits. There are a number of things that went into that increase. The middle two columns are the original budget. You can see very clearly how we were conservative, brought those projections down. And then the last two columns are what I am proposing in this budget as the amendment. Okay, and I'll talk about some of these more specifically. So let's start with sales tax. That's always the biggest one and the one we need to concentrate on the most. Just remember, it's 45 to 50% of our general fund budget. Our sales tax is 9%, with 4 of that coming to the city, 4 to the county, and 4 to the state and 1 to the county. Always heavily impacted by football season, and even in a football season like we just saw, where it's a short season, low capacity, we still had impacts from that. We still saw revenue be a little bit higher than what we expected there. So for FY21, in the orange, let me go back. The orange are actual, 2018, 2019, and 2020, and you can see how they jump. And they jump a lot based on what our football season looks like. So we did okay in 2020 because, as Megan mentioned, we had Georgia and Alabama here and at the beginning of that fiscal year. Okay? The blue columns are what we projected, and then the green columns is what I am recommending that we amend for the sales tax for 21 and 22. Okay, so what happened to make the green bar so much higher than the blue bars? It looks pretty big, and it is. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. This chart looks familiar to you. It should. This is what comes with the monthly financials. We do analyze that by month. I mentioned during the biennial budget process that we don't typically project by month because we have enough data to be able to project the year as a whole. But during this time, I had to look at every single month, and you can see kind of how all over the place that can be. For the first half of this year, about October through about January or February, we were right on track with projections. My monthly projections, very close to budget, a little bit higher at some points, but through that time, we were really close to budget. But then, not sure exactly what happened, but what you see here is that our last 5 months, circled in black, those are some of the highest sales tax collection months we have ever seen. So starting in February, March, remember, vaccinations started, restrictions started being lifted, the masks were kind of going away. We had a third stimulus payment come in March, which is why you see April collections so high. That is something very unusual, and the challenge right now is projecting and trying to predict how long that's going to last. Is it sustainable? What we're going to do? How football season is? All of those kind of things. Some of these months have been 25% higher than what we saw in fiscal 2019, which has been a base year for us because it was one of our biggest years. 20, we just kind of are not counting. We're looking at 2019 when we're doing those comparisons, and we are much higher than that right now. So how long will that last? And will we see, an effect of the COVID variant? There's a lot of things that are going on that we've got to consider as we move forward. I will mention that I am in constant communication with my counterparts across the state. This is everywhere. I mean, everyone is seeing this kind of sales tax growth, so not surprising at all. So forecasting for 21 is basically collections I have seen so far. We're already over budget for sales and use tax, trying to estimate July, August, September, thinking that people may be on vacation and not spending as much in Auburn because a lot of people were traveling. They had not been able to travel for a while. But I pulled July collections today. We're not quite done finishing up July, but we're over $4 million for July. So that assumption was not correct. We're still over $4 million, which is very unusual for a summer month. So even with this adjustment, we are likely to see sales tax be a little bit even higher than what I have anticipated here. The FY '21 is budgeted at 45.6 million. It is the highest sales tax budget we have ever had. And then I'm projecting in '22 for fall to be a very robust football season. As long as nothing changes between now and then. We have a new coach, 100% capacity, tailgating. Georgia and Alabama are at home. One thing that'll be unique this year is that Georgia will be in a different month. They are going to play in October, where we typically see both of those games in November. So a lot of things to consider, but I'm still being a little conservative, using some history to forecast the fall, and then also doing 3% over 2019 for the rest of '22. Okay, that makes our budget for '22 be about 45.8, which is pretty level with what we're seeing in '21. And we may see that even be a little bit higher, which is a little unusual.
Allison, within the sales and use tax bucket, are you able to drill down and see where those revenues are, like what category they come from?
We do. So a lot of this, as we moved into the real high spikes, were restaurants and apparel. And so we started seeing, as people got out and about, felt more comfortable, that has really spiked up. The big box type things have continued to be high. I mean, we're seeing it pretty much all over the place. So. And car sales. I don't look at car sales specifically by themselves, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that contribute to that.
Do our dollars that we receive from the state from online sales, do they come into this?
They are not here, and I'll talk about that one in just a second.
Thank you.
Anything else? Sales tax. Okay, and this is what Beth is asking for, Simplified Sellers Use Tax. So I wanted to mention this one again, just because it continues. It has spiked higher than any revenue source in the last 2 years. Now, a little bit of that is because more businesses are participating. The state is really getting those that should be participating and getting them in here. This is the 8% tax that you pay to a remote seller who is not required to pay our sales tax for any reason, because they don't have a store in the state or that kind of thing. So that, when you look at the original budget, 20 spiked up. We fully expected that with the pandemic. Everybody was shopping online. When we budgeted original budget for 21 and 22, the expectation was that as things got a little better, we might see that level off just a little bit from that spike, but that has not happened yet. Now, again, a little bit of that is because there are new businesses participating. But I am amending 21, and that's the actual collection so far this year, to be almost 30% higher. So it continues to be well over $200,000 a month. And so the budget for 21 is $2.6 million. And then for 22, still with a little bit of an expectation that as people shift back to in-store purchases and things like that, that we might see it level off a little bit. I want us to continue to be conservative with that. And we have 2.7 million. This is one of the revenue sources that helped 2020 and really brought us up, and our total revenue was up there. Okay. Occupation license, there's nothing significant here, but I wanted to show you the graph just to let you see. It has stayed the course. It was one of the things that we were concerned about early on in the pandemic with layoffs and closures and things like that. But it has really stayed the course. I am increasing the budget here, $230,000, which is about 2%. And then leaving it the same for 22. But as you can see here, it has stayed relatively level. We saw a few little dips as I worked with economic development during the pandemic to follow all those layoffs. We talked about that every day, how the employment numbers change. But in the actual revenue collections, we really did not see a big change there. And this is our second largest revenue source, so that's really important. Property taxes, Megan mentioned this. We continue to see nearly double-digit increases in property taxes. I'm increasing the budget by about $500,000 for FY '21, and again, that's based on actual collections. That's what we have seen so far. And in '22, it's a little less than 3% projected. Remember that the general fund has 5 mills of property tax, and anything that we do here We also do in the 16 mil fund, same type projections. Everything is the same, even in the 5 mil tax fund. So you'll see increases that are equivalent to this there. Lodging tax, and I mentioned this last time, it's not one of our largest revenue sources, but it has struggled. It has been, has affected it very, very much during the pandemic. So it is, even though April, May, June, we have rebounded very nicely. We are seeing well over $200,000 a month for those months. I'm still decreasing it just a tad because we had a lot of catching up to do for the year. So I'm budgeting 1.9 million. We may see it be just a tad higher than that. And then 22 is bringing that back up to what I consider a little more normal level, which is a little equivalent to a fiscal 19, what we saw. Now, if football season stays the way it is, we may see that be quite a bit higher. And I always include construction permits and do a little bit of a different graph here because I just want you to see how it goes up and down every year. It can go up, 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 come down, go up again, come down. One of the other revenue sources that saved us in 20, we had quite a number of construction permits, lots of permits and high valuation permits. So it can be a combination of the two. So this one is increasing as well, 1.8 million for this year. And then the budget for 22 is 1.6 million, which was the original budget. And then just an overall picture, total revenue. We are, I am projecting that 21 will be 99.5 million, about 7.1% higher than the original budget. It's quite a big increase, and 8% higher than our FY20 actual. 22 is projected to be 100.8 million, but 4.7% higher than 21. So we're in good shape. A lot of things that cannot be explained. Like I mentioned, it's a little bit difficult to try to figure out what's going to happen, and we're dealing with behavior at this point of how people are dealing with things as they come out of the pandemic and are spending money. So that's a little bit hard to predict. But this is where I think we will be, and we may even see 22 be a little bit higher than that. So any questions about the revenue? I'll talk about debt real quickly. Unless you have questions. Okay. Okay, debt overview. We do pay some debt out of the general fund, as you know. This is the same slide that I showed you in the original budget presentation. You can see our existing debt right now that's being paid out of the general fund is in the dark blue. And starting in about 22, we see that start dropping off. We start having lower debt service payments, which gives us capacity for additional borrowing. So the same things, we have the same projects included, projected to be borrowed for here. The same projects, one exception is that one of them is changing, the dollar amount is changing. So the 2022A, and all of these will be probably after the first of the calendar year. They'll be a little bit later in the year. But we have 15.5 million for 3 projects in the Parks, Recreation, Cultural Master Plan. So that's Town Creek Soccer Complex and Jan Dempsey. That is a reimbursement resolution that you have already seen. We brought that to you, and we'll be borrowing for that. 2022B still includes the Richland Road Connector and the Environmental Services and Public Works Relocation Project. What's changed here is the cost of the relocation project, and I'm sure you can imagine why that has happened, and Megan will talk about that as she goes through the CIP highlights. But I've added $7 million here, which we can still afford, and we still are able to keep our debt service ratio, which we look for debt service in the general fund to be 10% or less of total expenditures. 2024 is right at 10% if we go with this plan, and that includes a Boykin borrowing here, but then starts coming back down about 8%, which is a good place to be. All of those are here. The 2024 borrowing, although not in this budget, I project further out when I'm looking at debt, and so we do still have that here. It is still at 13 million, which was what the original projection was, but we know during the 23-24 budget, if that changes, the amount changes, whatever, we'll evaluate that at that time and see how it affects the debt service. So any questions about that? And that's it. Fortunately, most of our changes in revenue are good, and we'll be in a good place at the end of the year. Thanks.
Thanks, Allison. Thank you for all you do.
Oh, you need this, don't you?
I'm gonna move the microphone back down for short people. That's all right. Being 5'3" on a good day is always a challenge. So just moving forward, we're gonna get really a lot of what I'm gonna be talking from is in the budget message from me. So I just wanna start with a few things. There are 10 new positions within the city. And, we'll give from the lens that I added them. Jim played a role. We transitioned during the fiscal year in a few of these, but I was absolutely at the table the whole time. So just to run through these 10 positions and kind of where we are. 2 of them you knew about. They were discussed heavily during the short-term rental process. Somebody from inspection services, a neighborhood inspector, and a finance revenue officer. Our human resources folks really try to give great titles to things, and so it gets a little confusing. What is a development services customer service specialist? What that means is the person that sits at the front of the development services building and greets our citizens and developers and contractors as they come through the door and handles that for a number of departments in that business unit. And what happened as we realigned and moved some folks over the engineering services building, staff moves in different places. So that's been something we've long contemplated. Public safety communications, we added 4 communications officers. No personnel had been added to that particular group since 2008, and our call volume has more than doubled. So this was something pretty early in my tenure that public safety had reached out about, and the data spoke for itself. So I chose to add that, and that is paying dividends in how we manage our calls and our call volumes, and is allowing supervisors to be supervisors, and we are seeing great efficiency in that, and we always want to be sure that we're able to handle that. So that's helping tremendously. The other thing is community services administrative secretary. What that means is at the Boykin Community Center, when you walk in the front doors, there will be somebody sitting right inside the front doors as opposed to just a community services office. Information technology computer systems technician, that business card is very lengthy. And that person, what it means is as we grow in our electronic devices, as we do these great new systems that police, you just approved in the budget, the Axon system, among other things, we need a few more IT people to help manage all the technology that we have. And so we actually had an existing position that was converted to this, and then we added an additional one for new volume. And then human resources floating assistant, office assistant is a nice way of saying we have people out on various leave, or we have different volumes in departments where they need assistance in an administrative role. And this person just bounces all over the city depending on departmental needs, and is very helpful to us because they have a little more knowledge of the city. We do sometimes supplement with people from a temporary employment agency. Our challenge there is they don't have city knowledge, and they can't be as helpful to somebody when they call. They always have to get somebody else. So this has been a very valuable position for us. So moving forward with that, it's been a long-standing philosophy of the city of Auburn that we keep personnel costs as low as possible within the budget by still providing a very high level of service. Everybody that's sitting in this room that works here and everybody that works with them is very dedicated to our mission, but we try to keep our personnel costs below 50% of our total expenditures. And right now, as you can see in this chart, mid-biennium, we're at 41.15%, and that jumps up a little bit in fiscal 22 to 45.18%. And we'll be talking next summer in the biennial budget as other needs come along. We have a lot of right-of-way to maintain, a lot of water and sewer lines, a lot of things. And so as our infrastructure grows, so does our personnel. And as you're well aware, and we'll talk through in the capital program, and you guys, all of you have talked to me about this at one point or another, as we add these great and new wonderful parks and other city facilities, we do have to staff them. So if we are adding, big projects, that's big operations, and that becomes operational costs. So as you see, this 45% number could grow slightly and get closer to 50% in the next biennium. That would be why. So I'm keeping with tradition. I have no intention of proposing a budget to you over 50%, but this does include already built in here is fire station number 6. All of that is all in. So let's get to significant changes. What prompted me to tell you about significant changes? Anything over $100,000 was significant. So to just run through this, what's the $1.4 million increase in the appropriation to Auburn City Schools? Well, what happened is when COVID was shutting us down, the first call we got just about was from Dennis Veronese of Auburn City Schools saying, hey, I want to analyze what we've projected you're going to pay us during the fiscal year, because I don't want the city to overpay us and then us have to cut you a check back, that kind of thing. So ultimately, we true up at the end of any fiscal year. 20 ended up better than anticipated, and 21 and so on, this trickles on down. So this isn't new money, it's just money that they were due, and we true up during the budget process. The $424,000 for Cox and Wire, you're going to see another thing in 2022. This is rectifying everything that we talked about over a 6-month period about ALDOT money and not ALDOT money, and have some more or not have it. And so that's all that is. The bid did come in a few $100,000 higher than anticipated. And I also want to remind you, we put a $100,000, Allison will correct me if I'm wrong, it was $100,000 finish early bonus? 55. $55,000 finish early bonus is also kind of built into these numbers, and we may or not spend that, and that also includes a 10% contract contingency. So adding this is just building the budget for it, but we won't spend the money on the project if we don't need to. The $251,000 for the Exit 50 lighting and landscaping project, by and large, we're getting a grant from ALDOT, but ALDOT has very specific project management requirements and other things that we do, and I can suffice it to say it's easier to pay this $250,000 than to go through any other channel. So we opted that the project was more important than arguing about $250,000. On the land adjustment, $168,000 for environmental services and public works. This is just, we bought an initial piece from Dick and Jimmy Starr. We had to get an additional 3 acres from a different side of the Starr family, and we had no idea what that property was valued at the time, and so this is just adjusting out for that. The last one, $112,000 for credit card fees, is something we're going to have to talk about with the council over the coming year. You'll see an adjustment in 2022 for that. We do not charge citizens any credit card fees, but they cost us, and you're seeing that cost right here. So we did and are implementing, ironically, a parking app, and you guys agreed when we added the Wright Street parking deck that we could charge the app fees directly to the customer. We will have to have a talk coming up, and we'll get a memo together and get it to you guys, and I want your lens on this, but this is costing us well north of $100,000 a year just in fees, and we are getting payment that way, but it's something that we're eating. So it's here, but something to be discussed moving forward, and see how you guys feel about if we want to charge those to everybody, charge half of them, do whichever. So moving forward into 2022, we're back to the additional Cox and Wire roundabout expenses. The reason this fluctuates over 2 fiscal years, it's just when we're going to spend the money. It's nothing that we didn't tell you about while we were discussing paying for that project. The next one is a very important one. I am proposing that we spend an additional $1 million to pay our temporary employees beginning in fiscal 2022. What does that mean? A Parks and Recreation employee, a student firefighter, anybody, a temporary or part-time employee is making right now $7.91 an hour. We are not competitive in the marketplace like anybody else. We have done exhaustive studies locally, and we way underpay in this realm. So it is a $1 million hit to the budget, but becomes necessary when we're staffing gymnasiums, when we're staffing all kinds of temporary workers that do many things for us, and this becomes very necessary. So that is why I'm recommending this raise. There hasn't been, and Kristen, how long has it been since we've raised this? It's been a while. So the recommendation, we did do a market study, and this isn't just pulled out of the air. This was an exhaustive market study. Stephen, did you
What
have a
was it
question?
before?
Before it was $7.91.
Well, I mean, I guess I got my question answered. Thank you.
Probably $7.91 an hour is what we pay right now. So this is proposing to $10 an hour. So that is built into the budget at this juncture. And this is doing this. We have a large number of positions open that are very difficult to fill. So moving forward, we also have $870,000 to Auburn City Schools. Same thing I already discussed. The $284,000 from a new Opelika Road, that did come in over bid, but that's also moving money forward to the next year. Ironically, the next one, the $281,000 for Exit 57 lighting and landscaping is akin to what we're doing for Exit 50, except thanks to Congressman Rogers, the Exit 57 lighting and landscaping is in an appropriations bill and is likely to get approved. And we have some money in the MPO to pay for this, but we're likely to get a big chunk along with $3 million for a very major important training center. And that's an outcome of our federal contract with Bradley that I'll talk about in a minute. Did you have a question, Councilperson Griswold? Okay, just want to make sure. So back to fiscal 22, 115 grand for credit card fees. The $115,000 sounds really tricky for artificial intelligence monitoring of traffic signals. That is born out of our retired city manager who was very frustrated and continues to be. He will call me about this, about our signals not being smarter. And we're trying everything we can to get our traffic signals to be as smart as possible to adjust, because when the university's in session, we have one traffic. When the schools go in, we have something else. When fall break is on, it does something else. And we don't want to have to go flip switches all the time on signals, which by and large we can control from a laptop. These would be able, if it's an odd day and the university's in session, but everybody knocks off at noon on Friday, we want the system to begin to be able to adjust some things on itself by reading traffic. And this is a continued investment in being more efficient. So I lightly touched on the 108,000 for Bradley for our federal governmental affairs representation. And like I said, we're about to get $4.8 million for a small investment based on this. And we really appreciate Congressman Rogers putting these in appropriation bills. But we're very hopeful, and these have passed muster thus far. So it's a matter of them getting voted on in Congress. And then last, we need some new equipment in Parks and Recreation. This is something that's just a significant capital outlay piece that is a Bobcat compact track loader, which sounds like a very exciting piece of equipment, but it's a little loader that can fit on trails and clean things and help maintain and be more efficient. Any questions on those significant changes before I move on to the CIP? And we can
I
come.
just got one question.
Yes, ma'am.
Bag to the jobs that was available. Are all those full-time jobs?
They are temporary part-time. Most of them are not full-time work with the.
What the pay increase is going to
Correct.
affect is just our temporary part-time that will be affected.
But some of those could be up to 20 hours a week.
I think I'm talking about the positions that's available. That's position.
The
The
10
10
new.
jobs.
Oh, the 10 jobs are filled.
They already
We
filled?
may have one or two of the communications. I'll look to our two. Will says two. Two of the communications ones are not filled, and those are full-time. Yes. And those are always on our website, auburnalabama.org/jobs, I believe. Okay. Yeah, and those are not filled, and we have constant recruitment for a number of positions, like a lot of folks, but I always love to say our benefits outweigh most anybody's, and we have good education programs and other things we offer our employees that enhance that. So, any other questions?
Megan, have we ever looked into privatizing the right-of-way maintenance? Sometimes don't use them all year round.
That is a great question, and Tim Woody, our Public Works Director, and I have talked a good bit about, one of the things that we have privatized is a lot of our median maintenance, and we're looking to do some more of that because our employees take great pride in mowing the right-of-way, but the ones who mow the right-of-way are not into the beautification side of things, a lot of times pulling weeds and the meticulous maintenance there, and we have a few people that like to do that, but that's an ongoing discussion, and I know you're also talking about bigger bush hog style, bigger mowings and what have you, and I think we'll have that continuing discussion this fiscal year, and I think you may be looking at more contracts that fund some of that. We need our employees year-round that we can control because they do other things. They go out and mosquito spray, and they go out and do other things, but so we'll maintain a core group, but I think what we can put out and get done a lot of times saves us on equipment, and we're looking at some cost benefit on that. I think you'll just see more next summer about that, but it's a great question. And I think the median program has been extremely successful, and we want to continue that and expand that. And we've done everything we can. We have these nice right turn concrete islands. We used to put grass in them. Those were hard to maintain. And then we have to seal the cracks on the concrete little turn islands because then weeds grow up right through the middle and they drive me absolutely crazy. And they drive our public works department even more crazy. They're very hard to maintain. So we're always looking for ways to do that. And we're not real big on spraying really, really dangerous chemicals on those. So we're, because then it washes down into the creeks and so on. So it's a little bit of a challenge. So we've taken to sealing them and hoping that the weeds don't pop up. But all of those things are in play.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go into the capital improvement plan, and I'm just going to say we're hitting the highlights. And this is all on your pages 50 to 54 of your binders. And this goes, when the highlights that I'm hitting, it goes in order of how the CIP is laid out in your binder. So if you were looking for future years, and one of the things I want to remind you about the CIP is the only things that are truly funded are things in fiscal 21 and 22. 23, 24, 25, and 26 are a guesstimate, our best guess showing you what's coming. Now, there are a number of things, though, that reside in 23 that will be in design in fiscal 22. So unless you choose to not fund them next summer, they should reappear. A couple of other things I want to remind you about. Last summer was very difficult in the biennial budget, and there are a number of projects that disappeared from the long-range CIP, and I'll show you at the end because we have to balance the budget even in the 6-year window. So things are going to reappear in the biennial budget that have been gone, and things that got pushed multiple years out may come back sooner. That all happens at the biennial budget, but if you have specific questions about those when we get there, we'll be happy to give you a lens. A few of you have asked me questions lately on priorities on things. As we go into a biennial budget process, we also, during this next fiscal year, start to reevaluate intersections and a number of things gearing up for that budget process. So in the spring, I'll have more information for you, but if you've got specific project question, let me know. So to go relatively fast, but not too fast, through this, one major sidewalk initiative we have is just making some connections. I told you about this last summer in the Camden Ridge neighborhood. This meets our sidewalk policy, and this is also one of the reasons we wanted to propose this project, and it's already in the budget, but just hitting the highlights of it is Public Works can actually do this sidewalk they are able to get in there and build it, which actually helps us control timing and other issues, and we don't have to go out to bid. We don't mind going out to bid. It's hard to get contractors to bid. So that's something, and this appeared in the biennial budget. All of these were in the biennial budget, but I'll go through a few changes. The Samford intersection improvements, I feel like we've been talking about since the beginning of time. This is an important project, and once again, the letting, which is in ALDOT language means when we're actually going to award bids, has been pushed back again. And Allison, that letting is... Yeah, it's September, and we thought it would be sooner than now. The Water Resource Management Department jumped in and did some work that our citizens have not been happy about at Samford and Gay, but it became necessary to get this work done before ALDOT gets started. The ALDOT project, if they get started, we can't go in there and do water and sewer work we need to do unless it's part of that actual project. But to remind you, this is medians on College Street from basically the Fiji House at Miller Avenue down toward the intersection with Samford. This is a rapid flashing beacon crossing at the heart of Auburn. I know everybody knows this is one of my favorite terminologies, and you're seeing a bunch of those. And I'll sidebar, I've asked City Engineer Frazier to put a lot more dollars in the budget toward rapid flashing beacons and the flashing speed limit signs most of you have asked for in your wards, and we're working on that. You'll see some more activity in fiscal 22, and then we're really going to step up the pace. We've got to get an inventory of these things to do better. We're also testing a few different kinds, see what we like. But this also involves, I think the biggest thing too, is another lane on College going south. So you'll have 2 through lanes going south, and a right turn and a left turn lane, and then some intersection improvements, and then sidewalk widening, etc. So it's a very pricey project. It's got some MPO funding, and I can tell you also part of our holdup on this project is the funding side of MPO. It is not the MPO's fault. This is pass-through money from ALDOT, but the money is actually not available at the moment, and it's a long story. And the mayor happens to sit in a certain position with the with the MPO and the committee that he sits on, and we're going to be reaching out to AlDOT to have further discussions. We like to pool our MPO money and over multiple fiscal years spend it on bigger projects. And what we're being told is you have to, if you don't spend it in a year, it's just not technically in the bank, and it's just a weird situation. So we're working through that. One of many things on our AlDOT list, but the mayor is gearing up. Yes, sir.
Please remind us, MPO is
It's the
what?
Metropolitan Planning Organization, Lee Russell Council of Governments.
Okay.
And then just for further explanation, federal transportation dollars come to the state, and then the state has to dole them out, and they go to the Metropolitan Planning Organizations, and then on, we get our pro rata share. And so it's a very complicated way of saying you get federal transportation dollars, but at the end, it comes through them. And then AlDOT still has some control of that. So to go to some Northwest Auburn neighborhood projects, this is the Boykin campus improvements. We've talked much about this. What we're doing in fiscal '22, I want to remind you, is designing. And I'm going to be very frank here. This is the latest design. We have, as we're looking at it, we just had a staff meeting about 3 weeks ago to talk about phasing. The $13 million that's in here won't cover much of this. And we're trying to determine what we can do the most for with the initial budgeting amount. What this does involve is a branch library, a cultural center. We referred to it as a museum, but it's much more than a museum. That's why we're referring to it as a cultural center. A new gymnasium with basketball courts. We've talked about indoor and outdoor pools. We're relocating the recycling center that currently sits, currently sits here is where the existing recycling center is. It's going to go across Donahue where our fleet services is now. And we have some additional renovations we need to make to the Boykin Community Center, such as finish the facade. So we're looking at ways in which we can design this project, and it's probably going to end up being phased, as in this library shown on here, which is actually in this top area, maybe a 20,000 square feet library, so we may look at a 10,000 square foot library. We may do other things. The pools right now, budget-wise, are what's throwing this way out of whack. Very, 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 very expensive. So we'll be discussing this with the council further as we get deeper into design about where we think phasing could go. And I have some ideas about how we can accommodate the indoor pool requests of a lot of our citizens in a few other ways that may deliver the most improvements at this project and help with that situation as quickly as possible, but that may also put Lake Wilmore back into play. So when I tell you we've got a lot going this fiscal year, there's some things we may move a project up in the middle of the fiscal year based on circumstances when a little more is known. So that's where this is. Of course, all of this hinges on Public Works and Environmental Services moving before we could start this project. So remember, fiscal '22 is a design year.
What was number 7? What is?
Hold on. Number 7?
The round. I can't hardly see that. Open play field.
Okay, you got it? Open play field? All right, there you go. You'll be getting this presentation and we'll be posting it on the website. I'll email you the PDF, but it'll be on the website also. This is just the latest potential master plan. This is not a final layout of anything. It's just showing you what thoughts are and where things would go.
So the indoor pool is not in this particular drawing?
No, it's indoor. It's in this, in
Number-
the, sorry, this, now that I've lost the mouse now.
Number 1?
It is in the section of the building that heads north next to, can you see the outdoor pool?
Yeah.
It would be akin to that
So it's-
in the building.
Okay, that's number 1 on your legend?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
What we've been told is the amount of pools that have been spec'd are in the $40 to $50 million range, and that's why we have to take a new look at it. That's not affordable. And so that is what we're working through, and what we are doing is in the process of getting our design team together. But in our preliminary planning, it's where we are. That's why the commitment has long been there to try to get a warmer indoor pool to replace some losses at Health Plus, and we're still looking at innovative ways to do that for much less money. So that's something, remains to be seen, but we'll get there.
You said the pools were 40 to 50 million?
That is what our consultants, and these are pool consultants, are telling us. When we talk about the therapeutic aspect and then the competition aspect and the outdoor, we're talking about a lot of money.
Right, because these aren't your typical private pools. These are like you said,
Public.
Olympic size,
Mm-hmm.
public, ADA in all regard.
Competition.
And competition, you have multiple things mixing in one location, and so when we talk about phasing, some of those things may come in their final format in later phases. But what was signaled to me from Mr. Buston as well as this council, if I heard you, was figure out an indoor solution for pools. And a lot of people, are swimming elsewhere and have an interest in swimming here, and that is what we are feverishly working on. Whether that happens at Boykin or not will remain to be seen as we get further into the programming, but I certainly can't come to you and say, let's spend $50 million on pools. That's not, that is a massive undertaking, so we have to figure that out, and we do have some ideas that we're vetting with the consultants of a way to fix that. And there are options, including I call them bubbles, putting them over a new outdoor pool and heating the pool and adjusting the temperature. And it may not be 85 degrees, but it'd be 80. So those are things that we're going to look at, and all options are on the table until we figure out. I'm not signaling one way or the other. We're not here to make a recommendation, but I want in full transparency to tell you while we get into full programming of this has already reared its head as an issue. We have much to deliver at Boykin. We have one library in the middle of Auburn, and we have a large population. We have a neighborhood that needs walkable services. We're short on gymnasium space. We're short on, we need the cultural center is one of our most affordable pieces. We're going to have to move a recycling center across the street. That's all for us to figure out and tell you how we can deliver the most for the taxpayer dollars and what a phasing plan would be. But I'm signaling to you today that next summer, or if not sooner, I'll be back to you with a phasing plan for Boykin, understanding your expectation, at least at this time as I read it, is figure out something about an indoor pool, as we told people we would do. So give us a little bit of time and we'll get through that. But we have been working for months on solutions, and we're pushing forward, and Becky and her team are really, really turning over every stone.
Is this in this packet?
No, ma'am, I'll email it to you. And so again, all of those are that is an update of what was in the Parks and Recreation and Cultural Master Plan as we're seeing current layouts, and it has wonderful things, and the library very much, and the cultural center there. Still don't have a pointer, sorry about that, because it just that really helps it tie together. There's a garden between, there's walking trails, there's all kinds of number of things, and that will help tremendously make that just very much a community center. And it also has a lot of parking, as you can see, but we'll get there, and you'll have this in your packet.
So I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Jay.
I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but that 14 million will get us an indoor and an outdoor pool, just not our heated therapeutic pool?
No, that would be all of it. The 50 million would
I know,
just for
right
pools.
here, we just said there's a pool inside number one.
Yeah, and the outdoor, that you've got an indoor competition, an indoor therapeutic, and an outdoor pool.
I'm just saying that the slide here reflects an indoor and outdoor pool.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It does.
Just not our competition and not our therapeutic pool.
No. This slide. Oh, the money part, not the
Right.
drawing.
Money part.
Sorry, the money part was a stab last summer without knowing until we took a dive in the last fiscal year at where this really goes with our consulting team. So we have Foresight Group did the Parks and Recreation and Cultural Master Plan with us. They've taken a deep dive for us, and then Becky's team has researched with pool expert companies and peers in the field, and we are getting really high numbers on the amount of pools we want to build. And so what I'm saying is we're looking at options. We could go back. Lake Wilmore is a $10 to $12 million project. We could go back and put that project back on, build the pool associated with that, and cover that pool and heat it. And those plans are ready to be bid today. And so we were trying to get some more answers on how we cover that pool and if that would be workable. And that's just one of the things that we're looking at.
So overall, this chart doesn't reflect Well, this chart is a guess then, the total project budget.
Yeah, I think what you both are getting at is this is a plug number in the budget, and what the finance director was alluding to is, yeah, we'll be resetting debt priorities next summer, and we'll look at a phasing of this. Here's the interesting notion: massive parks and recreation projects. I mean, we're looking at moving, something like Richland Park up if we're going to build the Richland Connector. Those massive projects, to build out a full complex, is typically a $30 to $50 million undertaking. In the first tranche of Parks and Recreation and Culture Master Plan projects, we plan to spend $40 million. And here we are. One of the challenges is construction costs are high right now. Some things will go down, and we're looking at innovative ways. What we don't want to do is deliver architecturally. We don't want to spend crazy money on architecture, but these are embedded in neighborhoods and need to be quality projects that the neighborhood and our citizens would be proud of. And that's an expectation. And, while it is understood and was deliberate, the 5 mil tax fund is to Auburn City schools and not in the city coffers. So that makes financing challenges further. Schools had to be funded somehow, and they are. And so these are all things that we're just looking at. And we'll be back to you over the next year.
Let me just ask another question on that slide right there. Okay, it says, estimated construction start date. Is that the date that it's gonna be actually starting to be constructed? What about the demolition of it?
That's a very good question, Connie, and there are other budgetary things we'll have to do. Demolition would be built into the construction costs of this in terms of a budgeting side, but what that means, we'd come to the council earlier with a demolition package that we would bid separately and usually get the buildings removed. So all of this is predicated on Environmental Services and Public Works being fully clear of that property, which is a challenge in and of itself that we'll talk about in a few minutes.
Okay. I'm talking about the dates though.
Right.
Oh, okay. So all of that'll be in 2022.
Well, and that'd be October of 2022 would likely be the start of demolition.
Okay.
Very good
Which is
question.
fiscal year 23.
Well, estimated construction start date and then to complete a year later. Yeah, but you're right, it's fiscal year 23.
Yeah.
And that's why this is $1 million in just design right now, and the rest isn't actually funded by the council at this moment. All right, so North Donahue and Farmville, this is a traffic signal that will likely warrant, we're waiting on the elementary school is under construction. The city engineer constantly checks the warrants, but this is already funded, and I want to remind you, this is wooden poles and span wire. Because eventually with the North Donahue improvements, we will widen out that intersection, and this enables us to get a traffic signal up quickly. It'll be efficient, and we're not going to waste funding by putting up mast arms and having to move them. So that's where this stands, but when it is warranted, we will pull the trigger on it, but not until then. So the MLK Streetscape project, this project was one COVID victim in that it had a $1.25 million budget, and we started getting into design in fiscal 20 and determined really quickly that the project budget was going to be much higher. So we are wrapping up things with design, and this got pushed out to, I believe it was fiscal 25 and 26, or 24 and 25, and we have moved it back up for construction, even though it's not funded yet by you guys, into fiscal 23. So the money that we're spending this year is just completing out some design elements, and then it will be proposed in the biennial budget to be a go in fiscal 23, which Councilperson Witten's point means October of 2022 is when that actually starts. And I'm going to double check. I have my notes here as to when we had that slated, and that's right, in 25 and 26. And so the additional expenses, we definitely have a water line in there, but when you add curb and gutter, you have much utility relocation and some other things, this project got pricey. So what are we doing over the next fiscal year? We'll be meeting back. There was a lot of neighborhood consternation about whether or not there would be medians in this area, and staff is very, very convicted about proposing medians to soften the look of the railroad tracks and provide a sense of arrival. But we've got property owners that feel certain ways and residents of the neighborhood that feel other ways, and we'll get through that and clarify where people ultimately want to go during the next fiscal year as we complete the design and be ready to be out to bid late next summer, early fall. The Richland Road Sidewalk project is the section of Richland Road that directly abuts Sugar Jordan Parkway, and that is still slated for fiscal 2022. So that goes from Martin Luther King Drive to the Church of God by Faith. It also has a mid-block crossing at Dunford where you cross over, because if you were to actually cross Sugar Jordan Parkway and come down, the sidewalk will be on the western side of Richland, and then it crosses over to the eastern side. So that's where that project stands. On the public safety side, a quick update on fire station number 6. We had hoped to have this project done sooner. And when it got started, we have a great contractor. Things are going well, but not anybody's fault. We're having some material issues, acquiring needed materials based on production issues and other things. So it slowed us down a little bit, but construction's going well. It's a great project, and everybody's looking forward to its completion. So we anticipate we'll be finished in January with that project. The Public Safety Training Center, you talked a little bit earlier in your 280 meeting with Planning Commission about things around this. This is the old 280 rest stop. We talked about this a little bit last summer, where fire will have the mainstay of the projects up here, but police will have some things. We'll have the blue building up closer to 280. Will be a training center eventually. That's not budgeted, but we've got a burn pit, a burn building, obstacle courses, other training apparatus that they need. And so this was just an initial hit to do some basic infrastructure and so on, and we'll be proceeding with that slowly but surely. But this will be a wonderful facility, and it will enable fire and police to not have to use other people's facilities, and will enable us also to be a training center for other jurisdictions. So piece by piece, you'll see different portions of this appear in the CIP, and really burn buildings and burn pits and things aren't crazy expensive. So just moving on to the Parks and Recreation and Cultural Master Plan items, Dennius Park will finish someday, and we're hoping that's October of 2021. That is, you can see now on Glen Avenue, they poured a lot of concrete and other things. It's likely to finish in September, but I don't want to give false hope. So October should be it for sure. So it's gone a little slower than we would like, but it's moving along, and it's a great project, and we'll get you guys out there when we're getting ready to get it open. Town Creek Inclusive Playground, if you haven't been by, it's moving fast. I'm going to compliment our contractor on the Don Allen Development side. They're doing the building side of this, and we pitched the roof on the restrooms and some other things based on some recommendations, and I think it's an attractive, it's a restroom, but it's a nice looking building. So they've done a nice job, and this one's moving along nicely also, and you can really see if you go by, the equipment's being installed and some of it's stored. So it's going well, and will be a great project. The soccer complex is in the next fiscal year. We'll be out to bid very soon. I'll remind you, that's the freestanding. This is the main addition toward the back of the complex. Here's Wire Road. It's about a 19,000 square foot multi-purpose building with 3 fields. And then, Becky, are we bidding the turf or not? So we're going to go with natural grass, and I think you guys saw we have some happiness among our citizens. Great partnership with Auburn University and their expertise, and a lot of work of our staff. We have the fields in great shape, and we intend to keep them that way, but we are going to bid as an alternate. Because of the level of play, we have a artificial turf product that is also very helpful to lacrosse and others who may need to play out there. And we'll see where those bids come in, and I'll be to you guys if we're ready to recommend that. And if it's crazy expensive, we'll see, but we'll let you know where that lands and if that's a decision we want to make. I think the goal is, as some of you have seen in some emails, is this needs to be a premier complex for our citizens as well, and youth play and adult play, but as well as we will host some tournaments, and this makes it playable year-round, but we're going to keep the grass in tip-top shape moving forward.
Thinking the building is multi-sport and multi-purpose, multi-activity.
Right, multi-activity. That is a spot, and I'm sure Becky will have it smelling really April fresh, but we can host daddy-daughter date night there. We can do all kinds of other things in that building. It is volleyball, there's indoor soccer, there's basketball capabilities, there's other things. So this will be one of the largest facilities that we have that we can get big groups in to do certain things. So it ought to be heavily used. And remember, there's a follow-on roundabout project that's a little bit separated from this for the entrance on Wire Road that we're designing that you guys approved. Jan Dempsey, we're making a lot of ADA renovations. This will also go out next fiscal year, 8,000 square foot addition, this is the existing building in the dark gray. This is the addition to the back. So remember, the addition will include ceramic studio and storage and a dance studio. We're doing a small parking lot addition to the rear, and then a ton of renovation of the existing building and ADA upgrades that are very necessary. And that project seems to be tracking fine from a budget perspective. On the city facility side, get to environmental services and public works. Operator error. Let me see if I can get this to, wrong slide now. Here we go. All right, I'm not having much luck today. I'll try to zoom in one more time, but it's not working. Sorry. Environmental services and public works, as I struggle very much with this, is a large 63-acre complex, and I'll just use my pointer around. You've got the environmental services building that'll sit here. This is Wire Road up here in the corner. And so this is looking at the front of the environmental services building down here. And that will house offices, break room, locker room facilities, and some warehousing. And then here you've got fleet services, which for us, that means, that's where we maintain all of our vehicles and equipment. So that's bays. Environmental services building is about 44,000 square feet. Fleet is 35,000 square feet or so. And then down here at the bottom is public works. That's about 52,000 square feet. And mind you, a lot of the square footage in these buildings are warehouse, not offices, break rooms, etc. One thing that was extremely important to both me and the former city manager is that our break areas, these are crews that are out and about all day long, that they have really nice break and locker room areas. And they're also multi-purpose meeting space. So as we're doing trainings and crew meetings and whatever else, and that is what we've done. So it's nice space for them when they are having lunch and what have you. I want to remind you, because environmental services, most of their people are out and about, but say they have roughly 40 people working out of that building. And fleet, you have another 10 or so people, mechanics, et cetera, and supplies. And part of fleet is also we store a lot of different parts and tires and all kinds of things. And Public Works has about 42 people that work out of their facility. So we've got pole barns here and parking, and we've also got a way to secure this where there'll be gated off areas. And this is a little bit, out on the edges of town, so we have some security things going on here. But we are doing things like tying to city sewer and other things. City sewer is way down off the map in this lower corner. So it'll be a great project. Where we are today is we went out to bid with a steel package, and what that means in English is there's a long lead time on steel right now and steel ordering. We got some pretty good bids that we're evaluating, and that will allow us to order the steel. And kind of to the timeline Councilperson Taylor was talking about, the sooner we can get going on this, the sooner we can relocate everyone. So we may be to you with a steel package that just gets that ordered, and then we go out to bid for the contractor to do the rest of it. Are we still looking at a dirt package, Allison, or no? Yes, it would be everything else. Okay.
So
Go ahead, Connie.
So looking at this drawing at the bottom.
This area that I've got the
bottom.
the color picture.
The color picture. Now, which is which?
This is environmental services.
Okay.
This is fleet, and they connect together to get some efficiencies with break rooms and other things. And then Public Works is over here. And this would be the front parking lot for a lot of our fleet activity. A lot of city departments have to get vehicles maintained, and they can leave them out in the front area here where we can go pick up. And then there's employee parking behind the buildings. And then kind of on down, you've got big areas where we park our large equipment and other things and cover it in pole barns.
So this gray area, all the way at the bottom, is that Y Road?
No, Wire Road is on the black and white drawing.
This is
It's up
parking
here.
down
It
at the
runs.
bottom of this drawing, that bottom.
No,
drawing.
ma'am, that's just a drive. That is this drive right here. If you can see the cursor on your screen running
okay,
on the.
okay.
That's this drive coming up and going up here to Wire Road.
Okay.
You know how many maintenance bays you have in the fleet services area?
We have 8 or 10. 10. And they are for varying sizes of equipment. So fire trucks, garbage trucks, etc. We've got taller bays and shorter bays. And then, we'll have to equip and furnish this also. And some of that is in, and some of that will have to come later.
So this construction date is actually October this year?
Yeah, be the start of fiscal 2022, but yes, it's calendar October 2021.
And this $20 million is just like the rest of them, our original projected budget number.
It is not. Good question. What Allison touched on, and I meant to touch on, and thank you. We've adjusted this up by $8 million, and that's because of the climate of construction. Now, that being said, our steel package came in a little better in one of the debates that we had, and based on contractor discussions. We have HOR program management in helping us with this and getting some pricing, but steel is supposed to drop tremendously in December, and we don't know. This came in 10 to 20% less than anticipated right now, depending on which options we take. So things are looking good, but I am very hopeful and a signal to the staff that I don't want to come back to you for over 20 million. But we've added to this to get it done to facilitate the Boykin project. And we are looking, depending on how bids come in, we can shorten buildings, we can remove column lines, we have knockout walls in these buildings, so we have expandability. We can add more bays to fleet, we can do other things.
An earlier slide that mentioned a $28.3 million increase in this and the Richland Road connector. So is your 20 here?
Yeah, and the
reflective of that
Richland
20?
Road, yeah.
Okay.
Yep, very
Just
good.
make sure it wasn't this plus a
No-
part
no,
of
sir.
28.3 more.
No, the increase, the Richland Road connector stayed pretty level. Now we'll see where the bids come in, but when we present this to you, this is current estimates as we know them from consultants and ourselves. So,
So if this is only reflective of an $8 million increase, is there $20 million more for the Richland Road?
no,
Yeah,
this
what,
was
28.3?
budgeted in at 13-ish.
Okay.
And that included design, so some of which has come down. So design say it's $1 million, took us to 12, and we're back up to 20
Okay.
with construction. And then Richland, you'll see a slide in a minute, and we'll
Yeah,
talk about
sorry.
that.
Don't
No,
worry.
you're good, you're good. All right, so getting to that, this is the resurfacing slide. It's really pretty. What you need to know is we have punted on fiscal year 21 at the moment. We have $1.25 million budgeted. We are not finished with fiscal year 2020 resurfacing. We hope to finish it. We are working through all of this, but I need to get our roads repaved. A lot of them, you'll see East University Drive on here, where we will look to possibly do bigger sections. Please notice my hedge on here that not all of these may get done. Some of these may be shifted. And our major arterials are taking a beating. When you see the seal and the cracks, we call it crack sealing, that is actually a good thing maintaining the road. Our citizens say it makes the road rough and Auburn then doesn't look as aesthetically pleasing and so on. Well, I would love to get in there and mill down all this asphalt and get it replaced. It's tremendously expensive and we are challenged by contractor scheduling. And so we're doing what we can to do a massive contract to put 2 fiscal years together in fiscal 2022. Will we be completely successful? It'll be a challenge, but we're going to do what we can to get this done. It's easier when you're paving a mile of East University Drive to do a mile and a half if you're already out there and mobilized. So those are the things that we're looking at. But we've had some citizens weigh in, one of which is a woman on Bickerstaff. We've been out to meet with her, and we have extended the Bickerstaff resurfacing an additional block at her request, and it's not a big deal when mobilized to go out there and do another block. So that's what we're doing. A lot of you ask questions about this. We'll get you a better list when things move on. But these were all the things you saw during the biennial budget process.
If we have like some wish list streets to present to you, can we do that in an email and let your staff look at, or?
Hold on, and I'll explain one other thing that we're doing, and then hold that thought.
Can you get us a map that depicts all these?
We can. The hedge has to be. It would say draft across the middle of it because I don't want you out there with your constituents feeling like you said, and then I come back to you and say, no, this is all subject to change until we get the bid organized. But I'm happy to provide that to you.
Draft is fine, thanks.
Okay.
Let me ask a question. Okay, this Dewey Street from Pryor Avenue to the south end. Pryor Avenue, are y'all paving the road inside of Ridgecrest Apartments? It's on Pryor.
No, this is Dewey on the east side of Auburn. Pride on the Richland side was done last year.
Oh, okay. And one other question, this Fickerstaff, was that Maybill who asked for that? Okay.
It is, and we decided to go an extra block, and the engineering services staff has been out and met with her on site recently in the last week.
Okay.
Okay. So Moores Mill and Hamilton Road widening, we've talked about this. You approved a design contract for it, but suffice it to say, let's break it down. You'll have a right turn lane off of Hamilton Road onto Moores Mill Road in this vicinity. Then we're going to take this public entrance and extend this turn lane down. So the nice people that have to turn off of Annabrook, they now get a left turn lane, and they don't sit out in traffic in a funky curve. Meanwhile, you continue on down. The church will be building right turn deceleration lanes in yellow here. Meanwhile, we'll have turn lanes extended that go all the way down, all the way to Barkley Crest to let them in, and we do a tie-in. When we say a tie-in at Tutton Hill, there's already turn lanes at the Tutton Hill subdivision, and this is just, we've actually extended it just a little bit to allow Barkley Crest to get a left turn in, because this is about the only time that would ever happen. And so that's going to happen with this project. We're also building a sidewalk, and Auburn Community Church is paying for a good bit of this, and this will help both churches have turn lanes in and out. So it should be a good project. It's going to be a little challenging for those in the area, but we'll be moving forward with that fairly soon. Annaloo and East University Drive, Councilperson Smith is not here. This is something he asks about frequently. We are still on track to do that project, and what that really means, this is the Matcham and Chesney office here. This is old Sagahatchee that we're in the process of removing, and what that means is we're going to get turn lanes on East University Drive in both directions, left turn lanes, so we can cut down on the rear end collisions that you see in that vicinity. And then you will not be able to turn left onto Sagahatchee from here. That's still the plan, to block that, because we have a lot of accidents there. So that'll be a right in, right out. So, and that's been long planned. The Richland Road Connector, we talked about lightly. Not much has changed with that. We talked about the budget a little bit, and you see some costs this fiscal year that has to do with design and so on. It's an $8.3 million project, and we will be out to bid in the fall. And this is where we are hopeful for things to come in. I'll remind you that ALDOT at the moment is not happy about a traffic signal there, but our city engineer has been working morning, noon, and night with them, and we have some movement lately of willingness to talk again. So we're going to work through that, and we'll report back to you with hopes that we can get that approved prior to the road being constructed. No promises, but we'll remain hopeful and continue to work those angles as we assured you we would. There was a question earlier today. This comes out on Richland Road, exactly at the westernmost driveway of Creekside. Those align, and that's good traffic engineering, and that's how that is. So a lot of people that live back in this direction, if they don't want to drop their kids off at school in the morning or go through that traffic, will have the ability to come down to Highway 14 and go a different way. Exit 50 we have already talked about. That's already budgeted, and we'll be moving forward very soon. Exit 57 the same. South College and Shell Toomer long slated traffic signal is out to bid right now. So we are hopeful that gets done. That also includes, if you are coming from Tuskegee, that includes a right turn lane on the Shell Toomer Parkway that doesn't exist today. And we will be able to get that turn lane. We'll go out to bid and be able to get aspects of that done possibly sooner than the signal poles are in. And this is the steel looking signal poles, not the black ones that are in parts of the city. This matches what is on the interchange. Right of way, Beth, here we go. We're hiring a consultant that does a new thing. They drive with a vehicle and it laser measures things, and we have been doing pavement assessments for years, but we're hiring it done. And this will tell us what roads are in what condition. And that is part of the way in which we prioritize on top of when you ask about things, and we'll look into that and see where it is in its useful life and report back. So this is a good project. So if you'll see some vans driving around doing that, they're actually rating pavement in a much more technical fashion.
What about just striping?
Striping,
Let us know.
Okay.
yeah, if you let us know, the striping people come into town in mysterious fashion and go on about their way. So when we get it on the list, they'll show up and do 20 things on our list and disappear again and come back. We are looking, and we'll be looking in the next biennial budget at a smaller thermoplast machine. We're going to see how that would work, where we could do some crosswalks and minor striping on our own that have the reflective paint, but we're looking at a cost benefit on that, and I'm not sure where that's gonna land. But we've been very frustrated by our lack of ability to do some small striping projects with the reflective paint, so we're gonna vet that further. That's just coming around, and we're kind of checking the technology. And I know Tim Woody's gonna be at a national public works conference where he may get a better look at that coming up in very soon. All right, we're done with the CIP. I just have a few minor things to wrap up, and then any other questions? Oh, wrong direction. So, as we discussed earlier, we've carried some expenditures forward, and the funds go with them. We FY20 delivered $8.7 million that was unspent, and that returned to the general fund now for fiscal 21. Our revenues in 20 were much higher than expected, considering all things with COVID that also added to everything. And then we get back to, we had projecting some higher revenues than we had originally projected in the biennial budget. So we've shifted some things around in the CIP, but you could also see as I went through it, we have rising costs in the capital improvement plan that make things challenging. But we're trying to be realistic about what we can afford, by still the unknown with COVID still draws some unknowns moving forward. As I touched on earlier, we look at net in funding balance, and I talked about future years, and that'll be on the next slide, but, we're very much, we had originally proposed to be at 25.89% and 26.24%, and we're going to end up in fiscal 21 in the 40% range, and we're projecting fiscal 22 to be in the 34% range. And again, that's a lot in capital projects. We're always trying to bring that down, but we also want to be fiscally responsible and sustainable. And our operating budgets, we held off on a lot of equipment. I've moved forward a number of pieces, but I'll have a lot bigger requests next summer if COVID has stopped what it's doing today, and we'll see. It's not going to completely stop, but maybe we've got improvement, and we'll revisit that next summer and some through the fiscal year. Beyond the current biennium, when you look at ending fund balance down at the bottom where I'm putting the cursor in these future projected years, that's where a lot of stuff dropped off the CIP, because we had to balance that number last year. We still have to balance it this year. And you can see in future years, if we were to actually spend all the money we have for capital projects, we would be right at an ending balance that we want. So we're always going to be conservative with our revenues and our expenditures to an extent, and we want to be realistic in the 6-year CIP and not under-deliver and over-promise, and that's a challenge. So last, I wanted to touch on Juneteenth, as we said we would. This would be a new holiday. I would be asking you guys to consider a resolution just to officially declare it a city holiday. Our staff we already budgeted to pay our staff year round, but this would be a day. It costs us roughly $40,000 in kind of, I don't call it loss of productivity, but to pay out a holiday, it does cost. So this would be an additional holiday that I would bring forward to you outside of the budget process, because it's really already budgeted in a separate resolution, if you're okay with that, as we've talked 3 or 4 times before. And this first came out, I signaled to you right when the federal holiday was designated that I was looking at it and I would propose something to you. And we've talked a few times, and this is where I'm landing. I'm proposing to you that we consider this. The reason for the resolution is I want the city council's absolute approval before I would move forward with this. I feel that it's important that you are the policymakers of the city, and this would be a holiday decision resides with you on this level of holiday. And tracking with federal things this coming year, Juneteenth or June 19th falls on a Sunday, so that we would observe it on Monday, and if it falls on Saturday, the city would observe it on a Friday. And this would be moving forward from here forward, beginning with calendar year 2022.
So that 40,000 is like lost revenue from a work productivity standpoint, but also is that there's cost for paying those who are essential workers.
Correct.
Holiday pay.
And there's holiday pay and other things, and so that would be absorbed in departmental budgets, and we think we're good with that. If we were not, we would adjust people out. But the way our personnel budgets work, people have money, as you don't fill vacant positions, you have some savings and so on. Our staff is not allowed to use their personnel budgets for anything but personnel without without my approval, but usually they come in just fine. They don't come in over. Then public safety has much budgeted dealing with different overtime things, but we will adjust accordingly if we need to. Any other questions? All right, let's do the question part. Got anything else? We ran over, I'm sorry.
So that
CIP.
resolution for the holiday, that would come at the same time as,
It can come as early as Tuesday, or we can, this coming Tuesday, when the budget is on. Now, to the budget ordinance, this is first reading, that's up to you guys. I'm not, we have until the end of September to make the budget adjustments, and so this is first reading. If you have more questions or aren't ready to go, I understand that, but it needs to be on now to have first reading. If you're fine moving forward, we'll move forward, but it's just amendment. It's amending it. We haven't adopted budget. We're just amending what we've got.
Questions? So to move forward on Tuesday, if people do have questions, it'd be important to get them answered here this week, right?
A few of you have reached
you're
out,
comfortable.
and that's what we're here for. We want to answer your questions. They're very good questions we've gotten. You've had very good questions tonight. You can meet with me, Councilperson Smith, while he was not able to be here due to a work obligation. We are recording this. We will post it on the city's website once we get it captioned, but he'll have access to that to review. If you guys need to review, the public will have access, and I will email you a PDF of this presentation, just so you have the slides, because you get a lot of capital questions. I have probably 30 or 40 other slides of capital projects, should you have questions about them. I'm happy to send to you if you need to show your constituents or what have you, or we've got those ready also.
Anything?
So, I heard Beth ask the question about the striping. So the city does not do striping on streets, is that right?
That's correct.
So y'all have a list of streets that need the striping, and you turn that list over to a contractor or whoever?
Do we do temporary striping? We don't. Yeah, it's a very specific machine that we do not own. And so, yeah, you can email to me if you've got questions. Now, some streets, we don't tend to stripe local streets, which are most residential streets with center lines and things like that. It's not usually needed, but there are exceptions. Okay. I have to make sure that I don't say something that the manual for uniform traffic control device police don't come and get me. So that's why I'm looking at the city engineer. Okay?
Any other questions? Okay. Megan, I'd like to say something to the staff here real quick.
Absolutely.
As we look through this and Allison shares with us the revenues, I'm thankful for the people in our community that have spent that money, that could have chosen to spend that money elsewhere, and they've done that here in Auburn. And I'm thankful for the businesses, our entrepreneurs in this town, who have hung in there in a very difficult time and provide the kind of entities and institutions that people want to spend their money in. I'm very grateful for that. But y'all are never all here at the same time. Most of you here at council meetings, but I don't think there's a time that we see all the department heads. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate you, and I believe I speak for everybody up here. You work hard. In one of the fastest growing towns in Alabama, there's a lot of expectation and pressure put upon you on a daily basis, and you guys perform. And tonight is an example of that, as we go and look through this well-planned document with all of this 6 years of spending calculated and tried to be forecasted. And we got great report from our bond agency just a couple of weeks ago that we celebrated as we move forward with the next borrowing. But you guys do an outstanding job, and I just want you to know that we're all very grateful for how you represent our city and the way you serve our citizens, and are thankful for your dedication. So thank you.
And Mayor, I'd be remiss if I couldn't have done this without a specific team. We have budget staff, and don't know if you guys know Stephen Krantz, but he leads our budget efforts. He's been here about a year. I don't know how many of you have met Stephen. And then Katie Skinner, she's been with us a while, and Katie's moving on to new endeavors shortly. But we'll miss Katie, and she's been a wonderful asset to us on our budget team. And then Allison Edge and Erica, why am I going? Thank you. Sorry, Erica, I haven't eaten dinner, obviously. Erica Sprouse is our assistant finance director, and they worked handily on the budget. And then the rest of the team in the room, they submit about 1,000,001 documents that you don't ever see. And they're here because they also want to signal to you that they appreciate you, and what we do every day is important. And we're not a go if you guys aren't up here making the decisions you make. So thank you as well, and I am grateful to be surrounded by such a great team.
Yeah, let's clap for him. There we go. All right, are we adjourned? We're adjourned.